what's worthy of you? We're always thinking, am I worthy of it? It's just something outside of yourself. Well, what's worthy of you? And I think when you take that spin on it, you could say, well, this would be worthy of my energy, of my soul, of my heart for the next year, 2 years, maybe your life. And I think that spin can put things into perspective. What's worthy of me? Because people like get a goal and then they think, well, I'm not worthy of it. I think it's just the wrong question entirely. So what's worthy of you? And then that's when something larger than ourselves can come into play.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Szabo.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Savannah Podcast. Today's show is about purpose, but not just about purpose, the why behind your purpose. So in American culture, we're told, go to school, get a job, make money, and that's how you're going to be happy. And all along the way, we've got friends, family, media, society, all trying to tell us how we should live our lives and how we should make our money. Like, no, you can't do that. You have to do this. Like, oh yeah, art's real nice and all, but it's not going to make you any money, so you can't do that. Oh, you like that thing? That's nice, but no, you got to do this job so you can actually make a living, because otherwise you won't be happy. And what tends to happen, if you believe them, is that 20 or 30 years are going to go by and you realize that not only are you unhappy, that you never really found your purpose in life because you're so busy listening to everyone else's ideas about how you should live. Now, a lot of people have caught on to that recently. So now we've got a whole slew of coaches, teachers, inspirational leaders all going around telling you, no, find your purpose and live it. And that's how you're going to be happy. That's how you're going to make a difference. Don't listen to the naysayers and follow your dreams. But there's a piece missing from that. And to me, I really think it's the most important piece of all. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. Because see, if you listen to that at face value, you might think that life was actually all about you. You might think that listening to your heart and following your dreams means getting all the stuff for yourself that you can get. Right? So they say, do what you love and you'll have all the stuff for yourself that you've always wanted. But that's a trap. Because the real secret in finding your purpose is finding what you love to do the most and then learning how to give it to everyone else. Learn how to give it to the world. Because happiness in life doesn't come when you're struggling to make it for yourself or when you get up to work every day. Even if you're following your dreams and you're trying to get things for yourself, you'll suffer. You've got to have a bigger sphere of why you're doing what you're doing and, more importantly, who you're doing it for. If you do it for yourself, you keep struggling. You do it for others, and you'll find open doors where before you thought there were only walls. You'll find a new sense of joy from life. It's really an age-old spiritual teaching. Now, our guest today is a very inspirational young man. I had the pleasure of meeting him a few years ago in San Diego when I was teaching yoga. He's authored 3 books. He's been published by the #1 publisher in the world, Penguin Random House. He's a motivational speaker. He's given a talk on TEDx. He speaks at large corporations, schools. He spoke on the Vans Warped Tour, and he helps to inspire people all over the world. His name is Jake Ducey, and we're happy to have him on the show. Jake, welcome.
Yeah, man, it's great to be on the show with you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Really happy to have you on and finally get you on the show. Now, you've got a really interesting backstory as well. And I know you were kind of unsatisfied with where you were going in life, and you decided to get up and go backpacking around the world. And that was kind of the inspiration for your first book. Fill in some of your story for us and kind of let us know what led you to the point where you are today.
Yeah, man. Well, everyone probably can't relate to where I was being in a classroom, leaving, traveling, but everyone can relate to what I always say is most people are gambling on the biggest risk of all. And that's a bet that one day, as you were saying, then I'll have the time to do what actually excites me and makes me come alive after I do all these other things. And for me, I was in a sitting in a desk, and I think people can relate to that. Sitting in a desk you don't want to be. For me, it was a 19-year-old in school. For someone else, it might be a 40-year-old in a job, and they feel like maybe I'm meant for something bigger in my life. And that was the theme that was playing in my head that everyone can relate to. Though the appearances of the world can be different for each person. Mine was 19-year-old college kid. I was a first team all San Diego basketball player. I thought I was going to go to school, college scholarship. I'll study business. Everyone says tall people, in good shape. That means I could sell something for some company. And, I saw this future that I actually didn't choose. I kind of chose it by default based off of, as you said, the influences of parents, what other friends are doing, what other friends' parents say you should do, kind of what teachers. I had a Chinese teacher, loved her to death. She was my Chinese teacher freshman year of college before I dropped out. And she's like, she was from mainland China. So she's like, you'll be a very good businessman. You're tall, like grooming me for this thing that I didn't even really know I wanted to do, but it felt acceptable. So I thought, okay, I'll do this and I'll make a bunch of money. And when I got to school playing basketball, it's a full-time job. And then in addition to school, you don't have much time. So I got curious in the classroom. I asked my teacher, stood up, raised my hand, why can't we audit the Federal Reserve? And I was in economics class. That seems like a reasonable thing to ask in economics class, to ask your teacher, what are we going to do about the ever-growing debt in America, especially as a young person that's being pushed into the marketplace? And my teacher basically said, memorize this formula, stop asking questions. This isn't what this class is about. Well, it doesn't make much sense because it's economics. And so I would have I'd have battles with the class because the class just wanted to memorize. And that's great. I understand. But we're in a class that is grooming us to be the leaders of tomorrow. And so one day I got so angry, I slammed the door on my way out, and I looked at my friend and I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to drop out of school. I'm going to go travel. And I'm going to go right. And he was like, ha, ha, ha. Because my hair was, a buzz cut. I was 20 pounds heavier than I was in muscle. I was a collegiate athlete, I was a meathead athlete. And so that was a funny thing, right? And everyone can relate to, there's this voice in your head telling you to do something, but then everyone around you doesn't see you in that light. So you're not really sure if you should trust that voice. And what I decided to do was trust that voice. So the circumstances of being in college and studying economics, everyone can't relate to, but everyone can relate to the same theme. So I listened to that voice. It took me across the world where I thought, and we hear this a lot today, I'm going to go travel and I'm going to go backpack. And I thought, well, I'll find my purpose in Australia or Thailand or Indonesia or some other place. And that's the common theme. I'm just going to go travel. I just need to get out of here. And what I found was I was actually running away. I actually had a near-death experience and realized I was basically postponing living. It's destination addiction. Mm-hmm. And I had destination addiction. And that was what led me back eventually to do what I'm doing today, was realizing that, gosh, if I die over here, which I almost did, I slipped and fell in the rainforest and fell about 12 feet, saw my life flash before my eyes. If I were to die, I'm over here on the other side of the world with all these things still inside of me. And here I am running away, trying to get my next stamp in my passport.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we both have a very similar experience to that. I mean, I played college football. I was in the video game industry and had that same, what the hell am I doing experience. I was a little different. I thought I was going to become a monk. So I went off and I went to Thailand as well. I went to India, and that was my whole kind of process through that. But I think a theme with that as well is that there has to be a point when you are willing to do something for yourself. There really is, for lack of a better term, there is a selfish moment that you have to say, you know what, I'm not going to do what everybody else is saying. I'm going to do what I need to do for me. And that sparks the conversation, that sparks the journey. But I don't feel that's enough. I think that the journey inevitably leads us into something larger. And when I was getting ready for our conversation today, you know, my thought process, like, well, let's really get into the why and the doing it for something larger than ourselves. And then you had posted just the other day that wonderful post on social media about, like, man, we have to do things for things larger than ourselves. And I was like, oh, this is, you know, wonderfully, that's some great synchronicity. Like, this is awesome, because that's really what I think eventually when we have the courage to really do something for ourselves, it does lead us back to doing things for others, unless we get caught in that trap where now I'm doing it for myself and all these people are telling me, find my purpose, do it for me, get everything you ever wanted. And now I start listening to everybody again instead of my heart. And the heart, I mean, a lot of what we do on the podcast is we're telling stories about all these rich traditions that are talking about annihilating the ego or removing the ego or using the ego, but to get to the heart, so that you're not doing stuff, because the ego is always trying to do it for itself and the heart is doing for something larger. How important do you think it is to live your life for more than just yourself?
Well, if you actually even break down how to make money, how do you make money? You make money from service, serving. And we get so caught up, you can't even make a lot of money at something unless you get outside of yourself to, whether it's a product or a service, whatever you're doing, you have to get outside of yourself to increase your value to begin with. So it's kind of ironic. It's called, in commercial terms in the marketplace, it's called service. So you have to be able to get outside of yourself to serve anyways. And if you're an entrepreneur of any sorts, then the only way for you to make money is to get really good at something and provide that service, that talent. So if you look at it just from the strictly from the traditional sense of the marketplace, you have to get outside of yourself to do it. And then if you look at it, you know, what you were alluding to was, my dad had open heart surgery. And so, you know, I was running on a couple hours of sleep, waking up at 3 a.m. But I had so much energy and my mind was really clear. And then other days I'll sleep from like till 8 o'clock and then I'll feel kind of groggy. Well, what is it? Well, because I wasn't thinking about myself. And I think it's easy to get caught up in, people say, well, you know, I need to help people. And it can get boggy because it's like, well, how do I do that? Well, just look at it from, who can you live your life for that's larger than yourself? Maybe it's just your kids. That's there's women that lift up cars to save their children. Just that is just some way we can step outside of ourselves. Martin Luther King says, to answer your question, you said, how important is it to live outside of ourselves? Well, Martin Luther King says, you can't be free until you cast away the narrow confines of your personal concerns for the broader ones of those around you. You can't be free inside of just our little needs. As you said, the ego, it's impossible to be free because it's such a limited spectrum of consciousness that it's you're imprisoned. We get imprisoned by ourselves on a daily basis. And so you literally can't be free when we're thinking about this and that and this and that. And it always comes, Tony Robbins says, you can push or you can be pulled. When you're living from the ego, you need to push. And that's what you see with a lot of entrepreneurs on YouTube and Instagram. Work 18 hours a day, push, willpower. Or you can be pulled. Gandhi was pulled. Mother Teresa was pulled. Martin Luther King was pulled. Malcolm X pulled. They're pulled by something larger than themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's how Gandhi could go on these tremendous fasts and these things, because there was an energy that came from within himself. And I know you probably allude to the Yoga Sutras, things like that. Patanjali has that quote, Patanjali, the creator of the Yoga Sutras. And it's something to the effect of, when you find some great purpose, just simply means something larger than yourself. It could be for your friends, for your family, or it could be for homeless people. It could be anything. When you find that great purpose, all your bonds break their barriers, and you find dormant forces become active. You find yourself more powerful than you ever imagined. So there's more. It's just you draw upon more energy than the limited spectrum of your mind, because you get outside of the personal identity. When you're outside of personal identity, of course, there's way more energy. You tap into soul.
And I love that. And I also think it's important to kind of mention, because I think in the spiritual communities, as it were, a lot of people hear that and they think, oh, pull, which means it's going to be easy, which means there's no more struggle and I don't have to work and I'm just going with the flow. And so, like I see those memes on social media, like if you have to struggle for it, that means it's not for you and it's not worth it. I'm like, no, like just going with the flow doesn't mean like you don't have to work anymore. There's not going to be difficulty or challenge or struggle. But like you said, you're being drawn by something larger than yourself. You're being drawn by something larger than your ego. So absolutely, there might still be struggle. That's part of the process of growth, right? Like a seed's got to break through its shell to grow into this massive tree. So there will be that, but it is for something that larger experience other than that limited confine of the ego. There was something that I want to talk about too. So you were the first ever inspirational speaker for the entire Vans Warped Tour, and I remember following some of the stuff as that was going on, and you were doing that. And I'm sure through that process you were meeting lots of people, in particular young people, but people of all kinds. But
it's a lot of parents too, because the parents bring their kids.
Yeah, and so what do you feel in all those conversations that you were having for everybody? Like what are people really struggling with right now? Like what, on a broad spectrum, I mean, you interact so much with people, you're really active in social media, you got that, like, what do you feel is kind of the big struggle right now of, I don't want to limit to say our generation as in an age group, but like the people right now, because they're definitely, we can get in the conversations, the 1% and blah, 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 but for the average person, what's holding them back in this moment?
Whether it's 1% or not, in my experience, this is my experience speaking to, because we did like 100 speeches last year. So I met thousands of people, not just kids. And then the emails and stuff like that. I think it's a couple things. I think number one is people don't think they're good enough. So if you do have a dream, or if you don't, people don't think they're good enough. But here's what I play a spin on that. It's not whether you're good enough for your dream, but what's worthy of you. So we're trading our life away. No matter what we're doing, I am consciously trading my life away for what I do with my work. You're consciously trading your life away for what you're doing. Well, the problem is we're generally unconsciously trading our life away. No matter what your goal or dream is, you're trading. Gandhi traded his life away for what he did. Well, I think the spin on it is what's worthy of you. We're always thinking, am I worthy of it? It's just something outside of yourself. Well, what's worthy of you? And I think when you take that spin on it, you could say, well, this would be worthy of my energy, of my soul, of my heart for the next, year, 2 years, maybe your life. And I think that spin can put things into perspective. What's worthy of me? Because people get a goal and then they think, well, I'm not worthy of it. I think it's just the wrong question entirely. So what's worthy of you? And then that's when something larger than ourselves can come into play. And so I think number one is that. And I think number two, people get bogged down on what is my purpose? Or how do I help people? And I think it brings people into their mind rather than their heart. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's interesting to see that people think, well, I saw comments on that one the other day when I wrote about my dad, and I realized, well, what am I living for today? And people say, well, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to help people, but I don't know who. Mm-hmm. Think about just people in your family, in your immediate environment. It doesn't mean that Mother Teresa didn't go out and incorporate a nonprofit and was like, okay, we're going to inspire 1 million people. And I think that's the problem is people think, they'll be a light worker once they get their yoga certification, or they learn to meditate, or they get a 501c3, a nonprofit, or once they travel around the world. So the same mindset that moves people into a self-discovery mode, some people will call it spirituality, self-discovery, that moves them into it because they're dissatisfied with the cultural mindset of once I get the car, once I get the house, once I get the promotion, then I'll be worthy, or then I'll be happy. Once I get the dream house, the dream job, the lover, whatever it is. Well, now we're not in a materialistic pursuit because we move into self-discovery, but we're keeping the same once I get the yoga, once I get this, once I get that. And I think we can step away from that entirely. Mother Teresa just started with people in front of her. She was like, oh, this person, I'll give this person love. And it was like this thing that just grew out of her being present with people in front of her, not thinking about this like, I need a 501c3 and it needs to be tax deductible. Once it's tax deductible, then I'll be good. So it's this one side thing that people on their self-discovery or spiritual, quote unquote. And I think that we get bogged down in that. You are pure light. This reality is just light photons. When you really grasp that, you realize you don't become light by getting something, because anything that you get is just light too. If you actually look under an electron microscope, this reality, purely energy made up of light photons. So you are pure light already. And when you realize that you're already a light worker, you can already shine your light right now, whether it's on your child, whether it's on the cashier at the grocery store whose dad died last week and you didn't know that. And no one's looked her in the eyes because she lives all alone, and everyone's in a rush at the but she has to go to work, because if she doesn't, she's not going to be able to pay her rent. See, I think that when we recognize right now, you can deliver your light to people, and it's not a once I get my podcast up, once I do this, because it's not the quantity of people you influence, but I think the quality in which you bring your presence to your own life and then to the lives of others.
And I think too, the idea, which is an idea by a lot of people, especially kind of in the so-called spiritual or yoga communities, that they want to help people. But what do you do with that? Like, oh, it's such a huge thing. Like, I think actionably, it's like, okay, well, you help the person right in front of you. You try to be the best version of yourself that you can be and be a kind person. But I think a lot of people do get a little lost in that idea of like, well, I just don't know what I'm here to do. What do you say to people of like, okay, like what can you do today instead of trying to create some grand lofty idea of like, I need to accomplish this, or like you said, the destination mindset, or like the if-then mindset. Once I have this thing, then I'll be this version of myself. How do people get to that point today just to start walking on that path?
Well, I think just look at like Mother Teresa or Gandhi's life as an example. You can be in a job that maybe you don't want to be in, but when you shift the meaning of what that job means to you, you can find great purpose in it. I had a woman come to me that for coaching, and she didn't like her job and she wasn't inspired. She wasn't happy with it. Just a perspective shift. She thought she needed to go travel around the world and quit her job and take her life savings. And I said, well, what if instead you just looked at your work in a different way? Now she's becoming this leader in her office, and she's inspiring people, and she's opening people's minds, and she's bringing people together in a way they never had before. All of a sudden, what that's doing is it giving her a sense of purpose, but she's seeing that she's actually capable of a lot more than she thought she was. So it's growing her self-image. It's growing her confidence. So I think wherever you are, you can look around in your immediate environment and see where you can, as you said, just become the best version of yourself. And so I think that it gets so convoluted in like where I need to go and where I need to be to help people. Is like right now you can do that just by stepping outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. And of course I think, there's that quote, without vision, the people will perish, or Helen Keller says, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely, getting clear on like, what is it that you actually would want out of life? Mm-hmm. At the same time, working for a long-term vision, having a vision for yourself, but not neglecting that your whole life can change. Like just by recognizing that in your job that you think is not your life purpose, you can create your purpose and grow into your power, your value, improve your leadership skills. Like I just got my teeth cleaned, and my dentist, it's like her favorite thing in the world. It's just to clean teeth. That's changing my life, because if I don't go in there, I could start getting pockets in my gums. It could really mess up. Like it could cause a lot of pain if I didn't have a dentist. She's adding a lot of value to improve my life. So I think just the perspective shift, because there's probably other dentists that are like, just cleaning somebody's teeth, just cleaning someone's teeth. So I said to her, you're really doing a great service. You're really, you changing people's lives, because if they don't do this, it could cause a lot of pain in their lives. So I think that perspective shift to give meaning to the things can bring up a whole new source of energy.
Well, and I think too with people in our culture is that they think that to be living this life of service, and I think this is a result of our media culture, that you have to be doing it in everyone's face. You have to have 1,000 or 100,000 views on your YouTube page about it, and like it has to be this grand thing. But really, I mean, if you want to affect people's lives, you affect the people's lives around you, you're going to be way more enriched than a bunch of strangers you've never even met before on a YouTube channel. So it's like that may or may not happen. That may or may not be part of one's purpose, to get that grand, to like help the people that a Mother Teresa or a Martin Luther King has in their lives, or did in their lives, or still does, I should say, in their even though they're no longer in their physical body. But it really does start, like you're saying, like just wherever you are in your life, you can be fulfilled. You don't need to have everybody in the world knowing about it, or you don't even have to be touching everyone in the world, even if nobody knows about it. It's like, it starts with where you're at. And I really love that perspective. I know you work hard. I mean, you've done a lot in even just the last few years that I've known you. I mean, you've written, I'm not sure if you had just written the book when we first met for the first time or somewhere around thereabouts, but you've written 2 more books in that time. You said you're going around speaking all the time. How do you find balance between, what we could say, like your work life and your spiritual life? And I know I'm assuming probably that's like, oh, it's the integration of the two, but like, let's even to make it more specific, so we can't sneak out with that answer. Like, how do you find a balance between a spiritual practice? I know you do yoga. I'm not sure about what other practices you may have, but how do you find the time in working really hard to be of service to others, to also have those spiritual practices that allow us that withdrawal in ourselves, that moment where we're not getting bombarded by media or our mind or people saying this or that? Where do you find that balance?
Yeah, learning to say no is a significant one. There's a lot of people, of course, that, write me or whatever, and then they can try and guilt me if I don't call some random person on the internet or let somebody pick my brain or something like that, which is a common thing people say. So it's like, I don't answer, or I'll say no or something. And I think that the guilt earlier in my career, I would say yes, I'd answer every single thing. And it's like, it saps all your energy. So I think learning to say no, and that's something, no matter what someone is in, learning to say no to things can really in reverse be saying yes to a lot of other things in our life. So that was significant. Then, I mean, exercise, we're in the gym six days a week is really significant. My dad just had major open heart surgery, and they're like, dude, what is your deal? Like in 7 hours, he's off the ventilator, awake, walking around. They're like, what the heck? And it's because he's in such good shape. And, it's really significant because it brings a lot more energy to our life, and then the third thing is like, okay, I'm launching this thing called School of Thought. It's an online book club where once a month, every month there's a new book, and then we have designated chapters a week. I'll give video lessons and book notes and like all this cool stuff. So people just get this serious understanding of the books and how to apply them, like classic success and self-discovery books. And I'm doing that because I spend most of my free time, like my thing when I go with myself is I just read. So I thought, well, how could I turn that into something that'd be more of a living. So I looked at it from the perspective of how can I make my quiet time a business avenue as well. So looking at it from that perspective, so really taking strategic thought into the things that actually make me feel best, who I really am, and looking at those things and then trying to say no to as many things that don't fit into that, which is saying no to great opportunities, saying no to, a speaking gig in Costa Rica or something in Hawaii or whatever, that for whatever reason, it takes me out of my element that I don't really feel working on something. So saying no to things I think is so significant. And then the practices of reading is a really, big thing for me. It's just like, I don't work that much. I spend if you looked at me, 80% of my time, I'm sitting on my butt reading, basically. You'd be like, dude, what the heck? He just reads all day, So, things like that, and having a long-term vision, I think is significant, because you can drive yourself crazy thinking that if having these big lofty ambitions, whatever it is, in whatever profession or industry or whatever your personal goals are, it's easy to get caught in the idea that you need things to happen within X amount of time or else you get really, really stressed. So having 20, 30, 40-year vision is significant because then you don't work yourself into a frenzy of stress and, get your nervous system all freaking out because something doesn't happen as fast as you want. So I think that brings a lot more peace of mind, having a longer term vision. Otherwise, it's just such a grind.
Mm-hmm. Who's been the biggest inspiration in your life?
It's changed at various stages in my life. My girlfriend is a big influence. I was a workaholic. I worked literally when I met her. The first time she spent the night at my house 3 years ago, I woke up legitimately at 3 a.m. She's laughing. I can hear her in the background. I literally would I'm okay, this is great, but I'm just have to let you know if you're spending the night, I wake up at 3 a.m. I'm going to start working, So we go to bed at midnight and I'm up at 3 and I'm working. And at one time I hadn't been sleeping very much. I would routinely not sleep. And one time I was driving and my eyes were watering and I was my hands were shaking because I was so sleep deprived. My nervous system was failing. And it made me realize how much more to life there was. But when I started spending more time with her and being more present with other aspects of my life other than work, I actually found I am way more productive. I said to her the other day, I pride myself on not being the person that works 18 hours a day, but in 1 hour, I can get done more than what most people get done in a whole day's work. Just being so efficient. And so I learned a lot of that from her. It really changed my life. I had when my second book came out, it was my first with a major publisher. We had just been together. We had recently moved in together and it was 7 a.m. and, I'd worked for so long for this thing. And, she came in the room into the apartment in Hollywood at 7 a.m. She was crying. I was I knew I shouldn't have had a girlfriend. This is my big day. I have 100 things on my list. And she's crying. She's so selfish. Does she not understand? And, that voice just took over. And I had been on a call with one of my favorite authors earlier in the morning, and he gave me some advice, and the advice started echoing in my head. And his advice was essentially you're going to get there, dude. Wherever it is you want to get, don't neglect everything else right now to get there as fast as you can. So I could hear him. And so I was so I took a step back and I got present with her. And basically I ended up having this perspective shift, and we left the apartment, and I didn't get done a lot of the things that I was supposed to get done. I basically was whatever. And I went to sleep that night, and this voice was beating me up you idiot, you spent all this time doing this, and you missed this and this, and you didn't take advantage of this. But for the first time, I had this like really deep breaths. My nervous system was very level. It wasn't like really, for, I guess people can't see, but it wasn't in this frenzied state. And I said, if this affects my career because of this, then that's okay, because I'd rather feel good about myself. And I noticed I was working so much, I was always in a frenzied state, always had somewhere to be. And so I started working less after that happened. And I had my best financial year ever, working less than I'd ever worked before. So all this saying that from my relationship, I realized all the other areas of my life I neglected. So that was really significant. And that's probably been the biggest influence on my life. I make more money than I've ever made before, but I work less than I ever made. And I have a better relationship with myself and those around me. I'm healthier than ever. And it's because I chose to be extremely efficient rather than spending hours and hours and hours, like where it's just people, they're like, but I need to spend 18 just so I could tell myself that I work really hard, just so I could feel better about myself, which was me. And I think a lot of people do that.
Well, it's something that I resonate with a lot, in particular when we moved up to Grass Valley. I was like, okay, well, I'm not teaching 15 yoga classes anymore. I don't have my relationship with all my private yoga students and everything else. And so I got to work. And so like every minute's like me just working. I'm like, I'm gonna do the podcast. I got to get my online courses going. And I was a freaking pain in the butt. Like I was grumpy as can be. Admittingly, I default to grumpy. So it's something I'm still working on in my life. But I was working all the time, and it was like I was staying up late all the time. I wasn't getting any sleep, and it was just getting worse and worse. And as you said, like I was getting fried. And then a few weeks ago, I was like, you know what? Like for some reason, I ended up going to bed early with my family at like 8 o'clock. And I woke up at like 5 a.m. or maybe it was even 4:30 the next day, having already gotten like 8.5 hours of sleep. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is more sleep than I've gotten in like 6 months. And it's 5 a.m. and now I got the whole day ahead of me, and my mind is clear. And that was the thing. I'd work all throughout the night. I'd work until, past midnight. I'd get into bed. I'd wake up at 6 the next morning. I'd be foggy all day, so my work sucked the next day. So I needed all that time to work because I wasn't very clear. But now it's like, no, when I have every now and then I'm a bit of a night owl, so I will be out a little bit later. But man, if I have the opportunity to go to bed at like 8 or 9 o'clock, I do it, because as you're saying, like it makes the quality of what you're doing work-wise so much better, but more importantly, it makes the quality of your relationships better, because then I had more time available to be with my family. I wasn't as grumpy, I wasn't as foggy, I wasn't as stressed, thinking like, oh my gosh, I got to get all this stuff done, because like, hey, I know if I'm sitting down, I got those few hours in the morning now where like I can crank it out because I'm actually clear, instead of waking up saying, oh, I need coffee and I'm stressed and I got all this work to do. Like it really changes that perspective of being willing to work less. And that takes discipline, I think, especially for really self-motivated people to actually work
and
less.
I think also getting clear on what type of life you want to create influences that. I was like, do I really, because you have a choice to decide, like, do I really want to create that life? Or what kind of life do I want to create? I'd rather make $300,000 a year than make 1.2 million, 1.7 million and never enjoy it because you're constantly working. Or I'd rather take a step back and figure out, how do I influence just as many people that I thought I needed to influence in order to work 18 hours a day? How can I do that in half the time and still make the same amount of money that I would if I worked 18 hours a day? And that's when you get really creative about the ways you step outside of yourself to serve. Mm-hmm. A lot more creative thought. So, yeah.
Awesome. We're getting towards the end of time, and I've really appreciated hearing you and your stories and everything you got to say. Where can people find out more about you? I know you got a book that recently just came out. Tell us about the book. Tell us the best place to get in touch with you.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, my name is Jake Ducey, D as in David, U-C-E-Y, J-A-K-E, D-U-C-E-Y. So jakeducey.com and all the social media fun stuff. And yeah, any of my books are in any Barnes & Noble or anything like that online. People like Amazon, or I know there's sometimes you get people that boycott Amazon. So, you can find it at independent stores or whatever too. So yeah, on all those places. And yeah, the first book, Into the Wind, about traveling. Second one, Purpose Principles. And the third one's called Profit from Happiness.
And you also do private coaching as well, right? And public speaking, and that's all on your website, obviously. But
yeah, I got a few clients that I work with. I don't work with a lot of people. It needs to be the right relationship. But yeah, I'm gonna launch this thing, School of Thought, here really soon, which would be really cool. It's basically like a book club 2.0, where every week all these notes and video lessons and things like that, so people can really absorb and apply what they're learning, whether they don't have the time to really study books on philosophy of achievement or self-discovery or financial management, whatever the case may be. Or we read, but we're thinking about other things the whole time we're reading. So we actually really should read the book like 7 times because our attention span is so, that'll be really fun. I'm excited to release it, School of Thought, and that'll just be on my website.
Awesome. Well, for all our listeners out there, I'm sure that you've learned a lot, because there's been all kinds of awesome little knowledge bombs dropped by Jake today. Really appreciate you having you on the show.
Thank you.
Everybody, please go check out his website, check out his books. He's a really awesome guy. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a very present moment. Namaste. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the show today. Please go over to iTunes, write a review, let us know what you think. It helps us in creating new content for all of you. It also helps new listeners get a sense of what to expect from the show. We really appreciate your feedback. Thanks again for listening. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.